Ashley is the author of, co-author of Haiti Under Siege, the article in this in this issue of the ISR. And our second speaker will be Robert Faton, who is the author of Haiti's Predatory Republic, the Unending Transition to Democracy. All of this, and then there are many books available at Haymarket that you might want to check out after the meeting. I'll point to these again after the discussion. And without any further ado, I'm going to ask our speakers.
All right, for the third time in the last 100 years, the U.S. has invaded and occupied Haiti. In an insult to the Haitian people, right now U.S. Marines, U.S. Imperial troops patrol the capital of Port-au-Prince on the 200th anniversary of the Haitian independence. On February 29th, the Bush administration overthrew the democratically elected president of Haiti, Jean-Bertrand Aristide, and has since replaced him with the puppet government of Gérard Latortue. Just as they did in 1915 and 1994, the U.S. has dressed up their real imperial motives as a civilizing mission to bring aid and democracy to Haiti. Nothing could be further from the truth. Beginning with the Clinton administration, the U.S. has conducted a classic destabilization campaign designed to overthrow Aristide. They strangled the country with an economic embargo, backed the wealthy right-wing opposition, and supported the death squads who stormed the country at the end of February and into March. The U.S. aims to install a servile client regime that will obey U.S. dictates, implement its neoliberal economic program in the interest of U.S. companies, and repress any new popular movement. But the U.S. has set its sights not only on Haiti, but the rest of Latin America and the Caribbean, where it confronts a mass movement against its economic policies, as well as governments that have resisted the dictates of the U.S. This is gunboat globalization, otherwise known as U.S. imperialism. It is impossible to understand the current situation without the knowledge of the history of imperialism and anti-imperialist resistance in Haiti over the last 200 years. France established Haiti as its key colony in the New World and exploited hundreds of thousands of slaves to produce sugar and coffee for the world market. Led by Toussaint Louverture and later Dessalines, the Haitian slaves rose up, defeated the French and Spanish empires in the world's first and only successful slave revolution, and won independence in 1804. As part of the treaty, France forced Haiti to pay for its freedom. It demanded the price of 150 million francs for the loss of its property, slaves, land, and produce. Independent Haiti was thus born in debt peonage. It was the first structurally adjusted country. At the close of the 19th century, the U.S. aimed to replace European countries as the main power in the Western Hemisphere. The U.S. saw Haiti as one of its key territories to exploit and use as a base to dominate the Caribbean and the rest of Latin America. Using the pretext of a governmental crisis, the U.S. invaded and then occupied the country from 1915 to 1934. They promised to bring stability, democracy, and development. That's always the promises of U.S. imperialism. We're invading for your benefit. We're occupying for your benefit. In fact, the occupation imposed corvée labor, slave labor essentially, opened the economy to U.S. corporations, compelled their puppet government to repay loans to U.S. banks, and left the population poorer than before when it had originally intervened. Under the leadership of figures like Charlemagne Perrault, Haitians rose up against the occupation. The U.S. killed thousands of people in order to impose order. This first U.S. occupation laid the foundations for the Duvalier family dictatorship that would rule from 1957 to 1986. During the Cold War, the U.S. Cold War with Russia, the U.S. turned to support Francois Duvalier, known as Papa Doc, as an anti-communist counterweight to Castro's Cuba. Papa Doc won the 1957 election based on demagogic promises to black Haitian peasants and criticism of the mulatto elite. He seized control of the state inherited from the occupation, abandoned all his promises, established an accord with the mulatto elite, and built an enormous security force called the Tonton Macoute, which along with the military he would use to repress the Haitian population. In the 1970s, the U.S. found another reason to support the Duvalier family. The U.S. aimed to roll back the challenge to its rule that it confronted in the Third World by supporting dictators and strengthening its own economy by opening up the closed economies of the Third World to U.S. multinationals to find cheap labor. In Haiti, the U.S. supported Papa Doc's son, Jean-Claude Duvalier, known as Baby Doc, to set up free trade zones for American corporations to exploit Haiti's cheap labor. The U.S. pursued this policy with Reagan's Caribbean Basin Initiative in the 1980s. The U.S. wanted to turn the region's countries into giant sweatshops. It was a trial run for what would become NAFTA, the FTAA, and numerous other free trade accords. Baby Doc made sure to keep Haitian workers' wages down, terrorizing workers and busting unions. 60,000 Haitian workers would make baseballs for Rawlings, Pocahontas t-shirts for Disney, and textile clothing for companies like Levi's. But the neoliberal plan, which Haitians termed the American plan, or more bluntly, the plan of death, failed. After initial growth, the economy went into crisis. The new American agricultural imports undercut the peasant majority who fled to the cities to live in slums, and the new sweatshop jobs did not provide a living wage for those lucky enough to even get a job. Enraged, the peasants and urban poor rose up in the 1980s against Duvalier's cronyism and conspicuous consumption. They consequently came into conflict with the United States and its plans for the Caribbean and Latin America as a whole. The uprising called itself Lavalas, which means the cleansing flood. The peasants and the poor catapulted a priest, Jean-Bertrand Aristide, into its leadership. He would regularly denounce capitalism as a mortal sin, attack American imperialism, and its neoliberal economic plans for Haiti and the rest of the region. But Aristide's Lavalas was not a revolutionary socialist movement. It was a cross-class movement of liberal capitalists as well as representatives of the peasants, urban poor, and Haiti's small working class. This movement nevertheless drove Baby Doc from power in 1986. The U.S. whisked him away along with a fortune stolen from the Haitian treasury to live a splendorous retirement in Paris. The U.S. during the height of Reagan's second Cold War against Russia whipped up a hysterical campaign against Aristide, claiming that he was a mentally unstable communist. The U.S. backed a succession of military governments that ruled Haiti up to the 1990 election. The U.S. supported the 1990 election in the hopes that their candidate, former World Bank official Marc Bazin, would win, give a democratic veneer to sweatshop economics, and quell Lavalas. As they had through much of Latin America, they opted to sacrifice the dictatorship in order to save the capitalist state as a neoliberal democracy. But Aristide, to their surprise, entered the election and won an astonishing 67% of the vote in the first free and fair elections in Haiti's history. Bazin, the American man, only got 14% of the vote. Once elected, Aristide moderated his program to basically a very weak reformist one, abandoned much of his anti-capitalist rhetoric, and extended an olive branch to the United States, the Haitian ruling class, and even the Haitian army, all of which he had previously denounced. But neither the Haitian ruling class nor the United States would accept the olive branch. One U.S. official stated, Aristide, slum priest, grassroots activist, exponent of liberation theology, represents everything that the CIA, the Department of Defense, and the FBI think that they have been trying to protect this country against for the past 50 years. They feared that Aristide would represent a model that would spread through the rest of the Caribbean and Latin America, and therefore interrupt U.S. neoliberal plans for the region. So the U.S. backed the army led by Raul Cedras, who staged a coup in 1991 that drove Aristide from office. The CIA paid Emmanuel Constant to set up a Macoute-style death squad called FRAP to terrorize and murder Lavalas activists. And the scale and brutality of the coup years is impossible to overestimate. The forces killed 7,000 people in 3 years, created 300,000 internal refugees, and drove up to 60,000 people to flee the country on rafts to the United States and other islands in the Caribbean. The U.S. responded to the catastrophe that they helped cause in the most disgusting manner. Bush, of course, did express concern about the wave of terror the U.S. allies had unleashed. However, instead of letting the refugees in, the U.S. sent the Coast Guard to return Haitians to the coup regime or lock them up in, surprise, surprise, Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. The Bush administration did impose an embargo to save its face, but this was the leakiest embargo in history. They allowed oil to pass into the country, thus fueling the regime, turned a blind eye to the smuggling and black market economy, and only enforced the embargo on vital supplies that would go to the Haitian masses. In essence, the Bush administration backed a garrison state to punish the popular movement for daring to disobey the American plan of neoliberalism and sweatshop development. Clinton, although he postured during the 1992 election to get votes, continued the same policy as the Bush administration had. In fact, he weakened the embargo on the coup regime, locked up more refugees, while the CIA continued to fund the FROP death squads. But the refugee crisis mounted and started to cause Clinton a domestic problem. A movement started to develop to demand that Clinton set the Haitians free. Moreover, Aristide was in exile in the United States, campaigning to get the U.S. to invade and restore him to power. So in 1994, Clinton got UN approval for an invasion and occupation of the country, nominally to restore Aristide and bring back democracy to Haiti. Of course, Clinton's real motives had nothing to do with such noble ideas. Clinton's aims were the same as Bush's before them. He just found different means to accomplish them. Clinton wanted to stop the flow of refugees, legitimize the use of the American military, which had been discredited after the disaster in Somalia, and use a tamed Aristide to implement the neoliberal economic policy in Haiti. UN envoy Lakhdar Brahimi made the plans very clear. He's now in Iraq. He stated that the Haitian ruling class should know, quote, two things: that political changes are inevitable, but that on the ideological and economic front, they have the sympathy of Big Brother, capitalism. Much of the left was hoodwinked by Clinton and supported the invasion. The U.S. thus co-opted the leader of the Haitian masses and demobilized the beginning of a movement in the United States. And Aristide, to get back in power, really signed a deal with the devil. He accepted a neoliberal plan called the Paris Accord. He promised to privatize state monopolies, further open up the economy to U.S. multinationals, cut government payrolls, and maintain Haiti's cheap labor. He agreed to continue paying Haiti's $1 billion in debt, most of which he had inherited from the decades of the Duvalier dictatorship. At $45 million a year, the payments were larger than the budget spent on healthcare or education. He agreed to form a government of national unity, accept former Duvalier's bureaucrats. He agreed to give up 3 years of his term lost to the coup. The U.S. then invaded and occupied the country, whisked the coup leaders off to retirement at U.S. expense, let Emmanuel Constant find retirement in New York City. The U.S. troops invaded the FROP headquarters, stole all the documents, didn't let the Aristide government see them, because that would make clear the connection between U.S. imperialism and the coup regime. Once back in power in Haiti, and Robert will go into this, Aristide became a changed figure. He only ruled based on U.S. imperialism's permission, but the U.S. ruling class did not trust him and aimed to find his replacement. As Paul Farmer wrote, the author of a text entitled "Capitalism is a Mortal Sin" now meets regularly with representatives from the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and the U.S. Agency for International Development. He was once the priest of the poor. Now he's president of a beleaguered nation, run into the ground by a vicious military and business elite and by their friends abroad. Aristide finds himself indebted to the very people and institutions he once denounced from the pulpit. Aristide's Lavalas steadily degenerated in these circumstances. He sat up top a compromised government for a year, and then supported his loyal assistant René Préval, who ruled up until 2000. Over the last decade, in these circumstances, the Lavalas government, bureaucrats enriched themselves in positions of power, fell into corruption, and especially the police became involved in the drug trade. Even worse, the old Lavalas coalition split as it degenerated into a struggle for control of the state power. Ex-allies of Aristide formed their own opposition party, and they later helped build the Democratic Convergence, which included Duvalierists and the business elite. Later, an even more business-oriented coalition called the Group of 184 came into being. It is led by an American sweatshop magnate called André Apade. This opposition represented no real alternative to Aristide, and in fact was most intent on more neoliberalism, kowtowing to the United States, and supporting the ominous return of the Haitian military. The battle between these forces came to a head in the 2000 election, which Aristide and Lavalasse would no doubt have won, but they pushed their hand trying to get entire control of the government and rig the election in various ways that the U.S. had previously tolerated in 1995. So this was nothing really new, some of the shenanigans of the 2000 election. The U.S. took advantage of the crisis around the 2000 election to drive Aristide from office. They had long hated him, only reluctantly used him, and when the opportunity presented itself, they got rid of him. The publicly stated agenda that they were not for regime change was in fact not the case. That was their real unspoken agenda. The U.S. would not tolerate Aristide's incomplete obedience, wanted to set an example for the region, and feared the growing instability and another flight of refugees. France, which played a key role in this whole process, feared a crisis that would destabilize its own colonies in the Caribbean, reacted in horror to Aristide's 2000 election year demand that France pay reparations for the original debt charged to Haiti for its independence, a demand of $21 billion this year, and wanted to project its own imperial power internationally. So the U.S. set about a creeping coup. The U.S. set a destabilization campaign in motion. First Clinton and then Bush imposed an embargo, withheld aid, and got other countries and international financial institutions like the World Bank to deny aid. As a result, $600 million to Haiti for the last 4 years was withheld. The U.S. embargo can only be described as a crime against humanity. This is a country already with 70% of the population unemployed, 85% living on less than $1 a day, 50% of the people being undernourished, and life expectancy being only 49 years. This was the country that the U.S. decided to impose an embargo against. The U.S. embargo reduced an already desperate population to utter misery. Bush followed the logic of the Clinton White House to its logical conclusion: regime change. He came into office with a host of right-wingers who now oversee Caribbean and Latin American policy. People who were all right out of the Reagan White House, Iran-Contra types. John Negroponte, Roger Noriega, Elliot Abrams, Otto Reich, James Foley, etc. They had always perceived Aristide as a beardless black Castro. That was basically their view of what Aristide represented. So Bush used the National Endowment for Democracy and other institutions to pour millions of dollars into the opposition forces, into the Democratic Convergence and the Group of 184. The U.S. also aided the reorganization of the death squads under the leadership of Guy Philippe, Jean-Pierre Baptiste, also known as Tatoon, and Jodel Chamblain. All of these people are CIA assets from the past. Guy Philippe was trained in Ecuador during the early 1990s by the United States. He was a regional police officer who tried to organize a coup against Aristide in 2001. Louis Jodel Chamblain was second in charge of FRAP to Emmanuel Constant during the coup years, and he, along with Tatoon, were convicted in absentia for the Rabateau massacre and the murder of Antoine Ismaili. Stan Goff recently reported that these leaders found training on a Dominican military base called Constanza, where they also received shipments of weapons from the United States. Guy Philippe made the connections plain when he declared, "The United States soldiers are like us. We're brothers. We're grateful for their service to our nation and against the terrorists of Aristide." As Ira Kurzban, General Counsel to the Haitian government, put it, "I believe that this is a group that is armed by, trained by, and employed by the intelligence service of the United States. This is clearly a military operation, and it's a military coup." The U.S. used the embargo and these two forces, the so-called opposition and the death squads, to topple Aristide. But the U.S. itself finished the job. They were worried that Aristide might be able to fend off the coup by mobilizing the population and receiving assistance from other countries. Aristide had asked for international support, which of course the U.S. and UN refused, but South Africa and Venezuela offered military support. South Africa actually sent a plane load of weapons that was diverted to Jamaica, and Venezuela offered to send troops to defend Aristide. The U.S. then was forced to take action. Aristide said, "I was forced to leave. Agents were telling me that if I don't leave, they would start shooting and killing in a matter of time." Randall Robinson, a friend of Aristide and founder of TransAfrica, said he did not resign. He was taken by force from his residence in the middle of the night, forced onto a plane, and taken away without being told where he was going. He was kidnapped. The U.S. flew him to the Central African Republic, which was under a coup regime at the current time, and he was held under virtual house arrest. After a public outcry, he traveled to Jamaica and now to temporary exile in South Africa. The U.S. then invaded and occupied Haiti, completing the regime change. But Bush did not act alone. Stealing a page from the Democrats' handbook, he acted multilaterally. And that's a pretty surprising thing from the Bush administration, but they did. He got an Emergency Security Council resolution from the United Nations that had refused to aid Aristide. The U.S. then put together its multilateral interim force with 3,700 troops from the United States, France, Canada, and Chile that now occupies Haiti. The MIF has sent a few thousand troops to the key cities to enforce the rule of the new regime that the U.S. is establishing. At the end of the month, Brazil has promised to head up the UN occupation of 8,000 peacekeeping troops. Lula, the president of Brazil, thus aims to project Brazil as a sub-imperial power in the region, a junior partner of the United States, and an accomplice in imposing the American plan on Haiti. Meanwhile, the U.S. has established an interim regime to replace Aristide's government. Just as they have done in Iraq, the Bush administration has been completely brazen in their willingness to lie. They even termed their coup operation and occupation Operation Secure Tomorrow. In an unbelievable announcement, State Department spokesman Richard Boucher declared, "There is an orderly and constitutional process underway in Haiti." The U.S. has installed Supreme Court Justice Boniface Alexandra and selected Gérard Tortue to become Prime Minister, even though the standing Prime Minister, Yvonne Neptune, is still in Haiti. La Tortue is a business executive, worked for the UN, and was a neo-Duvalier who held positions in the regime that followed Baby Doc's fall. He has lived in Boca Raton, Florida for the last 15 years. Haitian leftists have taken to calling La Tortue's government the Boca Raton regime. And just as an aside, Boca Raton in Spanish means rat's mouth. So we've got a regime from the rat's mouth. Symbolizing the nature of this government, the U.S. flew La Tortue to a rally in Gonaïves with the leaders of the death squads who had helped topple Aristide. He called them freedom fighters that had liberated the country. La Tortue appointed numerous figures from the Duvalier era to his interim cabinet, including Gerard Abraham, a former leader of the military. He has also appointed figures from the Convergence and Group of 184, but of course he hasn't appointed anybody from Lavalas, which is the largest and most real political party in the country. To prevent Aristide from returning, the U.S. and La Tortue are threatening to prosecute Aristide and his accomplices on drug charges. The Boca Raton regime promises to step down after next year's elections, but they're madly at work setting up the American plan. It's moving quickly to really rebuild a modified old order according to the U.S. plans of the 1980s. A democratic shell, neoliberal economics, and a reformed military that will be in place before Haitian voters have a chance to vote on anything. The Boca Raton regime and the MIF have overseen repression of Lavalas and the Haitian poor at the hands of the death squads. It's not as severe as the repression of the last coup period, but nonetheless, it's quite severe. The National Lawyers Guild, which sent a delegation to investigate what's going on, found that 1,000 bodies have been dumped in the morgue in the Port-au-Prince morgue in the wake of the coup at the end of February. Haitian radio stations, almost all funded by the National Endowment for Democracy, regularly at 4 p.m. announce blacklists of Lavalas activists who should be hunted down. U.S. troops have collaborated with death squads in patrolling poor neighborhoods of Port-au-Prince and other cities that were the base of support for Aristide and Lavalas. Eyewitness Tom Reeves reports that, quote, U.S. Marines regularly march into the poor neighborhoods that remains Aristide's strongholds, alongside the reconstituted and remilitarized Haitian National Police, with both the Marines and the police firing into the houses and groups of people on the streets. Bodies appear in Port-au-Prince morgues daily from these incursions. Dozens of Lavalas activists have been arrested or driven into hiding, and the Haitian elite have taken the opportunity to crack down on trade unions, especially as people have been reading about in the Côte d'Ivoire free trade zone, where Levi's has just said that it's going to pull out its operations. Now that they have their regime in place, the U.S. has set about pursuing the old American plan. Right now, La Tortue has been meeting with the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank and setting up all sorts of new loans. The U.S. Congress is considering an act called the Haitian Economic Recovery Opportunity Act, ironically named the HERO Act, that promises to drop all tariffs on Haitian textile exports to aid the free trade zones. In other words, it is the failed plan of sweatshop development that has already wrecked Haiti. Unfortunately, forces like the Congressional Black Caucus, which have rightly come out and denounced the coup, are actually backing the HERO Act, which is neoliberal legislation which we should actually oppose. The U.S. has thus orchestrated and overseen a catastrophe of the for the Haitian population. Garbage has not been collected, electricity has been scarce, potable water sources have dropped by 75%, and the price of rice has almost doubled since the coup. And all of this has been compounded by the natural disaster of the floods that happened this last month. The American strangulation of Haiti and Aristide's betrayals have left the Haitian peasants and poor demoralized, but the American plan will inevitably produce another round of resistance and also flight from the stricken country in both votes for America. There hasn't been much resistance yet, but there have been significant demonstrations. There was a demonstration of 10,000 right after the coup, and just this last Flag Day in Haiti, there were tens of thousands of people that protest. So there's clearly the grounds for reorganizing an opposition, but there are enormous political questions that the Haitian people are going to have to address in order to come up with a new strategy. But it's important in looking at what the U.S. has done in orchestrating this coup that it's not only about Haiti. Haiti is about the rest of Latin America. Haiti is about the rest of the Caribbean. Throughout Latin America, the U.S. confronts a mass movement against its neoliberal policies, and several governments are standing in the way of the U.S. getting the free trade area of the Americas and other free trade deals. The U.S. aims to lock in its control over the region economically through various deals and is willing to use the military to accomplish their goals. The U.S. is already at war in Colombia over oil and regional control. It backed a coup 2 years ago against Chavez in Venezuela, and the National Endowment for Democracy has been doing similar work, funding the opposition to build up an alternative to Chavez in Venezuela. And of course, the U.S. also has its eyes on Cuba. The U.S. toppled Aristide to warn the people of Latin America and their governments of the price of disobedience. We must draw the lessons from this experience very sharply. The left must be absolutely clear about what to say about Haiti today. We should expose and oppose the U.S. coup, and we must demand an end to the U.S. UN occupation of the country. We should defend Haitians' right to choose their own government, free from any interference from any imperial power. That means we have to defend Aristide Lavallas' government, which was popularly elected, but we should give absolutely no support to it, since its own collaboration with imperialism led the Haitian masses into the political dead end that they found. The history of U.S. imperialism and its current occupation in Haiti demonstrates that it will never intervene for humanitarian purposes. This is the tragic lesson of Haiti, like it was the tragic lesson of Allende in Chile back in the 1970s. With the signs of resistance, the potential resistance, and the inevitable resistance of the Haitian masses, the left has to come up with a new strategy. It has to build mass organization, obviously, to fight for the immediate demands like an end to the occupation, debt cancellation, reparations, free and fair elections open to all parties and not overseen by imperial powers. At the same time, it has to build a revolutionary alternative that looks to the international movement against neoliberalism that can challenge and eventually overthrow the U.S. and U.S. capitalism and the region's subordinate capitalisms. Only such a revolutionary internationalist strategy can free resources so that Haiti can develop in the interests of its own people. This is not an easy road, but it is the only way for Haiti to overcome its historic problem of underdevelopment and scarcity, free of the chains of capitalism and imperialism. We here in the United States have an enormous responsibility to build a movement to keep U.S. hands off Haiti, to keep U.S. hands off Latin America and the Caribbean. And we also have an enormous responsibility of building international solidarity and a movement of the workers of the region to free ourselves from the common oppression that we face at the hands of the U.S. government.